Okay, let's see if we got this thing uncoiled. I'm looking at a big picture of Chris Hager, my buddy Chris Hager. Are you there?
I am. How are you, sir?
Okay, somebody's got some mute. You got a mute in here. You can't have the double. All right. So I got 1500 or 3 o'clock, and appreciate everybody up. We are probably 30 seconds from 3 o'clock, but we're going to go into the Q&A here. And what I want to do is I just actually got off of a podcast with Jack Posobiec, just to kind of start off today's Q&A a little bit about what's coming up in the next couple of days here with President Trump. I'm actually broadcasting to you all today, and I think we're on various social media platforms. And I see Corinne Daniel just came in. Corinne, can you hear me and see me? Just give me a thumbs up. And you can see me too? All right, beautiful. Thank you, Corinne. All right. So I just got off the Jack Posobiec's show talking about, what we're sort of referring to as the Anchorage Accords, right? And I'll publish an article later today that I will. I've actually, been back and forth with people in the administration about this upcoming meeting. But for the world, this is probably one of the most important meetings that two leaders in the world have had, honestly, in a long, long time. Probably since Reagan met Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland, years and years ago, almost 40 years ago now. Not quite 40, but you get the point. Where they, negotiated what was going to happen with the end of the Cold War, because except the big difference between that meeting between Reagan and Gorbachev and Trump and Putin is that Reagan held all the cards. He really did. I mean, the Soviet Union at the time was essentially economically stressed, and not collapsing necessarily, but certainly stressed. They had all kinds of internal problems. Reagan was really smart in his last term, in his second term, doing a lot of smart things to basically put the screws to Russia, put the screws to the Soviet Union, especially economically. And then everybody that's maybe old enough would understand also the idea of Star Wars. So the United States of America held a lot of cards. We held all the cards for the most part, except obviously we were in an equilibrium with nuclear weapons, right? Russia and the United States are still the two largest owners of nuclear weapons on the planet. So that's one similarity as Trump goes into talk during, for these talks in Anchorage or in Alaska. So that's it, though. There's huge differences right now in what cards the United States holds or doesn't hold. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why Zelensky has not been invited, because even though Zelensky was elected president in Ukraine years ago, he's no longer, he had to declare martial law, and he basically stopped all elections. So he's in a state of martial law right now. He's shut down freedom of speech pretty much. For those that don't know, they started recruiting 60-year-olds for their military. The fascist military units inside of Ukraine, called the Azovs, they are now being redeployed to the front lines to basically make the Ukrainians fight. It's ugly. It's really ugly. One other piece of data that I'll share with you guys before I jump into some questions, and I'm hopefully everybody's hearing me. And this is a little bit of in the weeds, but I think it's really important to understand, because the lust for war by the neocon establishment in the military industrial complex of the United States of America is very real, and you can feel it, right? You can feel it in this push to, Russia bad, everything's bad. You know, we got to support Ukraine, right? Is not good for Trump going in. Let me do this. Yeah, so that okay. Let me make sure I'm good. Can Chris give me a thumbs up? Chris, hey, okay, you can see me now. Good. So this like I said, this lust for war is real by people around the military-industrial complex. Actually, people around Trump, certainly members of our Congress, and even some are in his sort of orbit, in Trump's orbit. We don't hold those cards anymore. We from Russia's perspective, Russia has about 140 million people. Okay, so the United States of America has twice as many of that, right? I mean, so Russia has 140 million people. Their population for women and men ratio is like 1-to-1. It's actually like 0.8 men to 0.1, to 1 woman. So, so Russia doesn't even have they have such a huge manpower problem. So anybody that tells you that Russia, that Putin wants to take over Europe and wants to attack NATO is full of it. They are so full of it. It's unbelievable. Last thing before I jump into we got questions coming in. Now, think about this. Like when the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred in the early 60s, we freaked out, right? John F. Kennedy freaked out. We had the encroachment of the Soviet Union against our own borders, right? Our own frontier. And this was on the island of Cuba. Imagine if we were doing the same thing in places like, or if Russia was doing the same thing in places like Mexico or Canada, right? If they were butting up against the frontier of our southern and our northern border, because that's essentially what has happened since the end of the Cold War. There have been almost double the number of countries have joined NATO, and now now you get people in NATO talking about joining, Ukraine joining NATO. That's insane. So one of the things that I think we have to understand is what are Russia's interests in this thing, and that's one of the things that I have shared with the White House is for people to make sure that Trump fully understands not just what our American national security, vital national security interests, but what are Russia's vital national security interests. Russia does not have the rear end to be able to attack the rest of Ukraine, never mind Poland and Romania and the countries on the eastern part of Europe. They don't have the capability to be able to do anything more than what they've done. They just don't. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the scale anymore. They don't have the economy. I mean, they're really it's actually a country in decline. Russia is a country in decline. And it's interesting why we do so much with China, yet nobody talks about China, right? Other than China's manufacturing everything that we're wearing, right? I mean, you guys, I'm looking at some of my friends out there wearing baseball hats, or everything's made in China still, right? So anyway, okay. So I wanted to put that up front because this meeting between Trump and Putin that's coming up is such a seminal moment, not only in our history, but probably world history, because it is going to course correct us in a positive direction. If the talks fail, if Trump comes out of there and says Putin is a bad guy and man, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or he's, that's not a good place for us to be, because then the escalation, which we've already heard talk about nuclear capabilities, the escalation to something worse is back on the table, and people will start talking like that. And once you start talking like that, it becomes even more dangerous. So anyway, okay, all right. That's I got about almost 10 past, a couple of minutes before that. So what I want to do is I want to go to questions, and I'm going to get to as many as possible. I'll try to be very quick on the answers to the degree that I can. And I just do want to say thank you to everybody who are subscribers, who are joining us for the first time. you can go to generalflynn.com, which is my website. And, I'm trying, I write quite a bit. I like writing and I post quite a bit. I'm going to drop another article today that speaks specifically to this issue of this meeting that's coming up. The American people, I believe we have to have hope in President Trump, but I think our expectations must be metered, I don't want to say reduced, although in the article I do say reduced, because we're not holding all the cards. As Trump told Zelensky a number of months back, you don't hold all the cards. In fact, he hardly holds any. So, okay. So I'm going to jump to questions. At Sweet P 297. At Sweet P. Should the United States be concerned about nuclear war in Europe? Well, so good question. And that's essentially what I've been talking about. So this meeting on the 15th between Trump and Putin is going to it's going to come to a point where the outcome of it will have a consequence that will take us in one direction or another. If we continue to be extremely antagonistic against Russia, which is what the neocon left wants, and actually a lot on the right, the neocon right and the neocon left. What this military industrial complex that will drive us into the ground want is they want a boogeyman, and they love Russia as the boogeyman because we had him for so long. So we built up all these capabilities, and instead of looking at what China is doing. The Chinese they're the wolf closest to the shed here, and they're not even outside the shed anymore. They're inside the shed. So should we be concerned about nuclear war in Europe? You're damn right. But it's not in Europe. Nuclear war, once the nuclear cat is out of the bag, then nuclear war is global. Then it becomes global. It doesn't mean that there's a bomb that's going to go off, a nuclear bomb that's going to go off here in the United States. It just means that once that cat is out of the bag, there's a number of nations that have nuclear capabilities. Probably, I think it's 8 or 9 in the world, and all of a sudden it changes the dynamics of warfare in a overnight, or certainly in a second. Okay, so I hope that answered your question. I'm very concerned about it anytime somebody uses the word nuclear. Okay, at Dante Michael, big question: are we going to see justice? So I was asked yesterday. I did a show with Bill O'Reilly yesterday, for anybody that caught that. And he asked me point blank, do I think Obama was going to be punished? Was he going to see a jail cell or whatever, however Bill asked the question. And I said, no, I don't think the president of the United States, former president of the United States, Barack Obama, is at risk for that. Now, is he at risk for being subpoenaed and come into question, to be questioned and all that? Sure. But I don't think Obama is going to get what he deserves, as far as I'm concerned, because I have tried not to personalize it to the degree that I have as a human being, because it's really bad what he did to me. But I don't think that we should expect anything to happen to Obama. Now, that said, other people in his orbit, like Brennan and Comey, I do believe that they are going to have to see justice, that justice is going to have to be applied to them. And it's going to have to come very soon. We don't need any more investigations. There's plenty of evidence. Jesus, I mean, the amount of evidence that came out just in the last 24 hours alone, right? I mean, incredible emails and text messages and documents that have been declassified by Tulsi Gabbard out of the Director of National Intelligence. So the big answer, Dante, is, yes, that we're going to see justice, but what type of justice we actually see will depend on how courageous some of the people are in the Department of Justice. And frankly, the last thing that Trump needs to be worried about is this problem in Ukraine, but he's got to worry about it because it's a mess that was left to him by the Biden and frankly the Obama administration, but also left him because of Zelensky. So he's got to deal with that. But really, we got severe problems inside of our government, and we must see justice. The American people are going to demand it. They are demanding it. I'm demanding it, and I'm not going to let up on it. I think we have to be realistic about whether or not a president of the United States, in this case Barack Obama, because of what happened, do they put him in jail for that? I personally, I'm giving you my personal estimate on this, is that I don't believe that's going to happen to Obama. I would love it, but I don't believe that's going to happen. Others in his orbit, I do believe that they're in trouble, and there are plenty of whistleblowers that are giving a lot of evidence. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong on the Obama thing, but I just feel like that's kind of the tea leaves that I'm reading. Okay. Okay. At Lynn Miller, could you talk a little bit about Senator Cotton's bill? Great question. And for those that don't know, Senator Tom Cotton out of Arkansas, who we need somebody in Arkansas to step up to run against him. He is trying to neuter Tulsi Gabbard's ability to be able to do exactly what she's doing. Why would Senator Tom Cotton do that? Tom Cotton is, plays this Mr. Tough guy. Believe me, folks, like a lot of these members of Congress and members of the Senate, they are compromised people, and Tom Cotton's one of them. And I would love to have him on this show, and I may run into him at the airport here in Washington D.C. or on the streets at a restaurant, and I hope he comes up and challenges me on what I've written about Tom Cotton, or why he's doing what he's doing to the DNI. Why didn't he bring this point up when Biden was in office? Why didn't he try to neuter the DNI when Biden was in office? Or why didn't he bring these issues up when Obama was the president? Why all of a sudden now, when Tulsi Gabbard is breaking all kinds of information out there, and basically, if it wasn't for Tulsi Gabbard, my God, we wouldn't know half of what we know. I mean, not half. We wouldn't know anything of what we know. She's being really super courageous, and I guarantee you that she is under extraordinary threat to life. I can almost guarantee that, and that's just because we have, psychopaths that are not only inside of our government but certainly on the outside. So Senator Cotton's bill is one that is trying to neuter the Director of National Intelligence, which means neuter the President of the United States and his executive authorities to be able to decide how to do things, operationally inside of the intelligence community, inside of the intelligence system. He's got no business doing that. And you got to ask the question, why are you doing it now, Tom? And is it because he's a compromised man, and some handler around him is telling him he's got to do this now? I want to ask him that question. So if any of you see him, if you're from Arkansas, trust me, when the time comes when he's going to start campaigning for his seat again, I'm going to be out there, hopefully with somebody who's capable of beating him, because we need to get Tom Cotton out of the Senate. That seat in Arkansas will be a strong Republican, no matter who it is. And I think Tom Cotton needs to step down from the U.S. Senate. That's Mike Flynn's opinion. So you can take that to whatever store you want. All right. At Hillary P. How much is China controlling South America? Yeah. So that's a great question. And when you think about China, think about it from, first you can start inside of the United States, because the Chinese have like a grip over a bunch of our institutions here in the United States, right? Education, real estate. I mean, you saw, I think it was Secretary Pete Hegseth either yesterday or the day before, where he was talking about he's now got a task force looking at all the real estate purchases by China around sensitive military bases. So he's taking a look at that. If he has any recommendations, the President of the United States can seize that property by the order of the President. So that's number one. That's real estate, but I also mentioned subversion inside of the educational institutions of the United States, principally the Ivy League and other colleges and universities, certainly inside of our government. So the Chinese have infiltrated inside of our government. So it's not just South America. Now let's go down across the border, Mexico. The Chinese are working hand in glove with the Sinaloa, the primary one, Sinaloa cartel, and a couple of other cartels, but principally the Sinaloa cartel, on the infiltration into the United States of America of drugs. And they've been doing this for a couple of decades. The principal drug now is fentanyl. It's killing hundreds of thousands of people in the United States of America. And then you go down to the Panama Canal. The main conduit, the main controller of the locks, right? The way that you get into the Panama Canal and the way that you get out, either way, on the eastern or western side of the canal, those are controlled by Chinese companies. So that's why Trump was right when he came into the White House and he said, hey, right away jumped up and down about the Panama Canal. Remember he talked about Greenland, Gulf of America, Panama Canal. Well, the Panama Canal is super important because if we don't control that, if the United States doesn't control it and the Chinese do, we're talking about 70% of U.S. trade, 70% of U.S. trade goes through the Panama Canal on a daily basis. So it's an extraordinarily vital component of our national security. And I can understand if we had to seize it someday from the Chinese, why. Now South America, right? Colombia, Venezuela, Chile, Brazil. Brazil is aligned with China, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, in the BRICS nations. You've got major ports down in huge ports down in South America. The Chinese control or own about 80% of the ports down there. They control or they own them, or they have some. When I say control, they actually have giant capabilities in many of the large ports down there. There's one in contention right now in Chile, as an example, a big one. And so the idea of the Belt Road Initiative, for anybody that's ever studied the Chinese and the Belt Road Initiative, the Belt Road Initiative is not just China to Afghanistan or China to Russia. It's actually China globally, and they're all over Africa. They're all over South America. And one of the places that's at risk is Venezuela. I was really happy to see the president, essentially President Trump, through the Attorney General, designate Maduro, who's a dictator who seized control of Venezuela after an election. And the president of Venezuela is a lovely young woman, or lovely woman called Machado. She's holed up in the Italian embassy right now just because she can't. They're after her, right? They tried to arrest her after an election that she won. That's Maduro. He's the head of what's called the Cartel del Sol. It's the largest terrorist organization in the world now because, I was going to say a drug cartel, but Cartel del Sol is what runs the country of Venezuela. And the country of Venezuela has the largest known oil deposits in the world, okay, much more than even OPEC. So that's why there's a lot of interest in Venezuela, and we'll see what happens. But the Chinese are all over that. Not the Russians have a footprint, and they do things like Cuba, Venezuela for sure. They have their embassies are down in the other countries, but it's not about Russia. It's about what China is doing. So super important, and what China does down in South America. That's why our principal adversary right now is not Russia. Russia's a declining country. Like I said, 140 million people. That's half of what we have. China has 1.6 billion. Okay, at Bobby O. Now I'm going to watch my time. I'm almost at about 3:25. So I'm going to continue to drive on here through questions. At Bobby O. It's nice to hear you sound like the Mike Flynn I first met when I was serving in the third, I don't know, JAG 30 years ago. We must have met maybe I was outrunning you on the streets of Ardennes in Fort Bragg. Who knows? Now you met Putin back in December of 2015. That's right. How has his worldview and or goals changed since? Well, so yeah, it's interesting. Great question. I just briefly met him. And all we really did was exchange a handshake and a polite greeting. But people forget that during the Obama administration, literally less than a week after the Sochi, the Russia's hosted Sochi Olympics in February of 2014, is when Russia attacked Ukraine and Crimea. So the latter part of February, in fact, the exact date is February 28th, 2014, was when the attack occurred. They attacked into two of the eastern Donbasses, the provinces, if you will, and they seized Crimea, and they've held it since. And now they hold, I think it's upwards of about 4 provinces, and they still hold Crimea. So what has changed? And that was 2014. Here we are, 11 years later, right? And we've gone through 2 presidents, right? Or actually 3: Obama, Trump, Biden, and now we have Trump back. So 4 presidents. So the world has changed quite a bit. What happened is that the United States of America, principally under Biden, during the Biden administration, strategically, they pushed Russia further into the arms of China. Okay. So the winner here so far is China. The United States of America, as I said at the beginning, Trump doesn't hold very many cards. His hand, the hand that he has been dealt is shitty. And, excuse me, but it's that bad, because there's not a lot that he can offer other than, hey, Russia sits in these Donbasses, they sit in Crimea. Putin's not about to give that up. And that's why and Zelensky's a bad, crooked, corrupt dictator, as far as I'm concerned. And so I think that the worldview, you've got 2 people that are going to meet. And I said this earlier today, that if I were advising Trump, number one, Putin speaks perfect English. He rarely likes to speak English in more open forums because it's just a point of pride for him. But I think if I were Trump, or if I were advising him, I would throw everybody out. I'd throw everybody out of the room, even the interpreters. And because Trump doesn't speak Russian, but Putin speaks perfect English. I'd throw everybody out, and I would just have a mano conversation and say, okay, we've got the world, right now that we have to look at. And when we come out of this meeting, when we come out of this room, we've got to come out with a far more positive outlook globally than we have right now. That's what I would recommend. And then, so what does that mean? Putin is an anti-globalist. Okay, he is a nationalist. He's a populist. He's very popular over in Russia. He's not, when you talk about all these people that talk about, Putin this and that in this country, and the other thing is he actually just did a poll. They did a poll over there, probably in the last year. 80% of the Russian people want a much stronger relationship with the United States of America. So and the United States of America has never gone to war physically with Russia. Okay, we had the Cold War, but we never have gone physically against Russia in a war. And actually, when it mattered, Russia came and worked with us, particularly against the Nazis in Europe in World War II. And then again, they worked very closely with us to defeat ISIS in Syria in the 20, essentially the 20, probably 10 to 2014, even further on time frame, because we were working with them. We were doing special operations with them. We were doing naval command and control exercise with them. And they were part of a flotilla, a naval task force down off of Somalia too, for those that remember back in the days of the pirates. So we've worked with Russia at different times, and we should, and by all rights, we really could do it again if we got smart about it, instead of being pushed to war by a complex that wants to spend your money, wants to spend my money on things that don't matter. Okay. So the worldview has changed quite a bit. in 11 years since that first attack by Russia, and then what what Biden did, and frankly, what Zelensky has become. So, and Zelensky, a little piece of intel is Zelensky's not in charge of anything. If you really study the command and control of Ukraine, he's got a chief of staff named Yermov, and there's a military commander named Budanov. And Budanov doesn't like Zelensky. Budanov doesn't like Yermov. Yermov is his chief of staff. He's as crooked, as they come. And Yermov is making all the decisions for Zelensky. And I'm talking, by congressional dollars, we've spent $175 billion already. The United States, $175 billion. It's probably closer to 500 if you start taking in all the other pieces of things that we have offered and provided. But by rights, by our congressional mandates, it's been over 175 billion. And I can tell you that one of the things that I do in my side, my sort of a side job, I help out whistleblowers. We have a federal case right now, whistleblower case in a federal court. It's a civil action. We've turned it over to the Department of Justice. But just so you folks know, this is kind of, you help me. You help me do this kind of stuff. We have a civil case for almost $42 billion of U.S. taxpayer dollars that were supposedly sent to Ukraine, siphoned off, and then came right back to the United States of America and into different people's pockets, okay? Organizations, and in some cases, individuals. And we filed all of the records. We had all the records, so we don't file any cases unless we have rock solid evidence. And so that's on the books. And maybe one of these days, maybe the next time I do this, I'll go over the cases that I have right now in court that we filed as whistleblowers, right? Okay. So I hope that answered your question, and the beginning of your thing about it's nice to hear you sound like the Mike Flynn. I don't know whether you're being a wise ass or not, but thanks for reminding me about 30 years ago doing something in the military. I love being in the military. Okay, at Garrett Wilson, why are you in Washington, D.C.? That's for me to know and for you to find out. At Garrett Wilson, I'm in Washington because I'm planting my flag here, and I want people to know that I am not going to give up, right? Yeah, Yvonne's sending smileys. Yeah, I've been here for a few months, back and forth, but I spend a lot of time, probably half my time now in Washington, D.C., because it gives me, access to the kinds of people that I need access to be able to do the things that I'm doing. And right now it's just so, a lot of people will say a lot of things, but like I said, I'm here because I wanted to plant a flag in Washington, D.C. to know that we have one opportunity left. And that opportunity, the American people voted for in November. If we don't take advantage of this opportunity, we're going to lose this country. Okay. And I think everybody that's on this Q&A, everybody that's currently subscribes, and those that are considering subscribing, understand what I'm talking about. I think if there's anything that has happened in the last couple of presidential cycles, the American people have finally realized that our country is at risk and we could lose everything. And we could quickly become a socialist communist state. I mean, overnight. It didn't take long for the Roman Empire to collapse. It literally collapsed in one generation. And same with Athens, and same with the British Empire. The British Empire literally damn near collapsed overnight in the early part of this last century, in the early part of the 1900s. It literally collapsed overnight. And then, of course, World War I, they lost the majority of their young men. They call them the Kitchener's brigades, if you ever study history. And it was really a travesty. And that saw the decline of the British Empire literally almost in a decade. So we're in a very sort of fragile period of U.S. history, and now we've got to take advantage of Donald Trump. And I want him to like do things that are extraordinary, right? And and I'll say back to back to what I said earlier about the meeting between him and Putin. Whatever the outcome, and this is me speaking for myself, whatever the outcome of this meeting, I am going to support President Trump. Okay. I may not like the outcome, and I might, analyze some of it, but I am going to support it because number one, he's our president. Number two, he's going in he's got a very tough spot that he's going into. It's kind of like if you were just looking at the physical part of the war, right? Putin owns the territory and he's not going to suddenly walk away from it. And the people that of the territory that he owns, they already in 2022 actually had elections and they voted to be part of Russia because they don't like the Nazis that are fighting against them from Ukraine. I mean, and that's not all the Ukrainian people, but that's the military, a portion of it, and only a small portion of the Ukrainian military. But these guys are vicious. So anyway, okay, at Michelle Peterson. And if you're my Illinois Michelle, thanks for all that you're doing locally up there in your church and in your community and everything that you've done to help children. So your question is, this is a good question from you. Why hiding the Epstein files? Too many in the Capitol are involved. That's you're asking questions. So she's asking me, why are we hiding the Epstein files? Are there too many in Washington, D.C. that are involved? So why they're hiding the Epstein files, I don't know. What I do know is that they are not going to go away, that there will be more to come. And I know that because there are already one or two other whistleblowers that I am aware of. And so we have to really protect them. But the Epstein files are not going to go away. And we cannot have two sets of rules, right? One for them and one for us, right? Can't have it. So if people are compromised, that's kind of the second part of your question. Are there many in Washington, D.C. involved? Likely. The answer is yeah, probably. Elites, we call them the elites, right? So are there elites in government, in corporate world, overseas, right? So are there people involved? Yeah, there's people involved. I mean, Epstein Island was real. The manifests that we already know are real. The people's names that were on them are real. All the things that we know, there's a lot of reality. This is not conspiracy stuff. This is like reality. And, Ghislaine Maxwell is real. Some of the people that one of the victims who's now dead was very real. Sadly, tragically, she's dead. We don't know what the payouts were, but there were payouts by whoever the disgusting prince, right? So they had payouts. So this is not fake, phony, made up stuff. This is real stuff. We cannot have two standards of justice, and these people cannot get away with this. So again, from my perspective, and anybody that's been following me very closely, I have been very vocal about this. Right now, I haven't raised it up again, but I'm not going to let it go. And it's one that's going to bubble up again. So the Epstein issue is not going away. And if there are people that are here in Washington, D.C. that are caught up in child sex trafficking or child sex, which I have a real tough time even talking about it, that we cannot put up with them. And like I've said, even I'm from the state of Florida, and I'm a resident in Florida, and I applauded Ron DeSantis, who signed off on the death penalty for pedophiles. I'm fine with the death penalty for pedophiles. So that's where I stand on that. Okay. So I hope that helped, Michelle. And thanks for all you're doing. Matt. So Matt, what does the phrase fight like a Flynn mean to you? It means basically never giving up, right? Don't feel sorry for yourself. Don't, like I have my bad days. I got days when I'm like, why am I doing this shit? Right. But I'm also not, I do know what we're up against. I really do. And I have a real good grasp of sort of what I would call, what we used to call in the battlefield, a fingertip feel for the operational environment, a fingertip feel for the battlefield. I have a very good fingertip feel for what it is that we're facing. And this is my life. My life is national security. My life is intelligence. My life is strategy. It's the analysis of of our adversaries and who's against us. That's all I've ever done. I mean, certainly as an adult. I mean, and I was always a kid in a fight. I didn't necessarily pick fights when I was a kid, but I never backed down from one. So that's what that phrase means, and it just means never give up. Never give up. I know you're going to have bad days. I know that there's some people on here that have had terrible days. And you lose a child in combat, as an example. I know Chris Hager's on here, and and we may have other Gold Star moms or dads or parents or spouses, but you have, and I'll screw it up, Chris. How you used to say it, you don't lose the pain of it. It morphs into something else, and but you never forget it, right? You always have it. You always live with it. As a child, I lost a very close sister in a very tragic accident. And, we didn't fall apart as a family. When I went through all of my persecution, I got a lot of brothers and sisters. We didn't fall apart as a family. We actually came together. That's what Fight Like a Flynn means. So anyway, so that, for those that want to join me, I'm here. Right. Okay, I'm at 3:40, so we still got a little bit of time, trying to get through as many of these as possible. At Todd Doyle, did Benghazi wake up the military to the massive frauds happening in Washington, D.C.? So it woke up a lot of people. Benghazi is another one, right? Benghazi is another criminal, corrupt act by the deep state and the military industrial complex, but certainly by the deep state and the CIA, intelligence community complex. So I was at DIA at the time, right? 2012. I know a lot about this and our response. And I've testified, actually, I testified to Congress on this closed hearing. In fact, a little piece of intel or sidebar on that. When I did the closed hearing, the person who I was in a closed hearing with that Benghazi committee for about 4 hours, one of the people that questioned me for almost an hour, and it's the first time I ever talked to him, questioned me for almost an hour, was Adam Shifty Schiff. How about that? Came down there into the bowels of this skiff where we were being questioned. And it was Adam Schiff back in 2012, 2013 timeframe. That loss of an ambassador, for those that remember, we lost an ambassador for the first time in a long, I don't even remember when. Decades. I don't even know if we had another ambassador that was ever treated like that. He was brutally. He thank God he died of suffocating, essentially. And I say thank God because they dragged him through the streets. They deboweled the guy. It was just disgusting, these savages that live in that part of the world. And everybody's seen the movie and all that, but Benghazi was a huge mistake. And people, Hillary Clinton, of course, the very, very famous "What difference does it make?" Right? That "what difference does it make" is where that comes from when she was testifying. So tragedy. I think that people still need to be held to account for that. Nobody ever really was. Even the people that were the guys that were heroes there, were contractors working for the GRS, I think, contractors that were providing security to those compounds. They even got screwed at the end. You talk about guys that got injured. They've had family problems. They didn't even get taken care of because they weren't military. They weren't formally assigned to the CIA. They were contractors, so they kind of got screwed a bit. So Yeah, and I don't think I'm glad you brought up Benghazi. I didn't think that was going to get that kind of a question today, but that's another one where all of these things have to be, we have to go back and connect these dots because when Donald Trump came in as the 45th president, nobody talked about the deep state prior to that. Now we talk about the deep state, right? What's the deep state? I talked to a friend yesterday who's back in government, and he goes, I don't like to use the word deep state because it's just too broad. Exactly who are these people, right? And they do exist. They do exist. And I think that we're starting to see, in the case of Tulsi Gabbard, we're starting to see names being called out, and we've got to get to the top first. I don't, there might be whistleblowers, and there are down in the bowels a little bit, and they're starting to give what they call state's evidence. But the people like Brennan, Comey, Clapper, Rice, Strzok, McCabe, these people have to be held accountable. They committed such a level of subversion against the United States of America that we just can't allow them to get away with it, because if we do, they'll do it again. Okay, at R2D3, what happened to D2, right? Wasn't it R2D2? So at R2D3, what do you think will happen to Adam Schiff? So that was the next question. So I think that Schiff, like Al Capone, who I think was responsible, they knew was responsible for murdering, like, I don't know, 16 people or something. They got him on tax evasion, right? So I think Adam Schiff, who tried to destroy the presidency of the United States of America, lied to the American people forever, is going to end up probably going to jail, my guess, and my prayer, my hope, for something like fraud, IRS fraud, tax fraud, right? Which is fine with me, I mean, if he goes to jail, for that, or if he goes to jail for lying to the American people, either way he goes to jail. And back to those states that don't have the death penalty for the pedophiles, maybe what they'll do with Schiff is they'll put him in a cell with one or two of them. So that's what I think should happen to Shifty. Okay, Roger. Is someone going to be held accountable for the Biden decline cover-up? All right, so maybe what you're talking about, I know that they're looking into, watching my time, 3:46. I know that they're looking into the what are they calling it? Signature gate or something, the auto pen gate, right? Everything's a gate. So they're looking into the auto pen and the legality of auto pen. And the mental decline of Biden, the severe decline of Biden, although everybody knew that he was in a state of decline even when he became the president in 2021, which is really ridiculous, but that's the case. So his severe decline, especially towards the end. So a lot of the pardons, as an example. So, there are people that they've already identified, names that they've already identified that were responsible for doing the auto pen, right? So there's an accounting of records. So when something is going to go to the president of the United States for a signature, it goes through a whole bunch of stages, right? It goes through editors, it goes through historians, it goes through all kinds of different characters, because if the president of the United States is going to sign a document, or there's going to be an auto pen signature, that it has to pass through those stages, right? And that's for the normal process, especially for things like pardons, right? Pardons, it goes through a very, very long series of steps. Presidential findings is something different, and that still goes through steps because it has to be letter perfect. And so everything that goes to the president for signature, if it's a document with words, trust me, it goes through an editorial process, like you read about. So, I don't know the answer if anybody's going to be held accountable, but is there somebody looking into it? 100%. 100% they're looking into it, because if it looks like there was some unconstitutionality of it, then people need to be held accountable. And frankly, those that were issued pardons or some type of commutation, or not commutation so much, it's probably not a good word, but certainly the pardons, and maybe some other actions that this false fake president that we had for 4 years did, from a 2020 rigged election. I mean, we had a coup. They attempted it in 2016, 2017, and through the first presidency of Trump, they executed the coup in 2020. They held power for 4 years, and the American people, through our sheer willpower, overcame all that and reelected Donald Trump. Thank God. And they tried to kill him. They, being the deep state, tried to kill him a couple of times. The guy took a bullet to the head. Okay, almost 350. At Tina O. Sir, did you see that Joe Pienka is now working for Eric Swalwell? I absolutely did. And it's interesting. Joe Pienka, notoriety of one of the FBI agents that came in and asked and questioned me, was also the FBI agent that the FBI sent in August of 2016 into a meeting with me and Trump and a couple of other members of his staff that were being briefed on intelligence stuff, right? Because this was after Trump got the nomination. After the convention of summer of 2016, they do an initial intelligence briefing. Pienka was actually sent in to spy on us. That was the initial touch point for the FBI and the CIA to spy on us. So Joe Pienka then comes into my office, so on and so forth. Joe Pienka then gets reassigned out to the San Francisco field office, and now he's assigned, or now he's taking a job. I believe he left the FBI. I posted about this the other day because I didn't know, but then I found out because somebody told me. Thank you to whoever digital soldier told me that. Said, hey, he's no longer in the FBI. He's no longer out at the San Francisco field office. He's now working for Eric Swalwell. Well, okay, so that's interesting because Pienka was San Francisco field office is responsible pretty much for China. Okay, it's also responsible for the connections in and out of Silicon Valley. So Pienka has a lot of connections, a lot of touch points, and China's one of them. And this is what got me thinking about this when I found this out. And I actually, if you follow Catherine Herridge, she is like a pit bull who never lets go. She's worse than a pit bull because pit bulls will let go after a while. Catherine Herridge won't. Catherine Herridge is now looking into this issue because Swalwell, as we remember, was, he dated Fang Fang, the Chinese spy who absconded back to China after she was busted, and she's dead now. She was killed. So Swalwell was essentially working for the Chinese government for a long time. So why would he bring Pienka in? Right. And that's now a big question of mine. And I'm going to dig into that. So Joe Pienka, if you're listening, you are not off my screen. Okay. 352 at Rowdy J. Top 3 characteristics you assess for a good leader. Self-discipline, compassion, right? And I would say I'd add in, I'll add in a component of compassion, which would be empathy, right? Empathy, because I think those two kind of go hand in glove, but but they do mean different things. So self-discipline, compassion, and empathy, I think are super important. And I think humility. I think the third one would be humility. I think being able to recognize that you're wrong at times matters. And being able to learn. And I think that it's not about eating humble pie, but it's about understanding humility as a characteristic trait for leaders. And on that note, I always have taught, and I'll say it to you all, this crowd, because I would teach young officers and young NCOs young sergeants, the ability to control, right? There's certain things in your life that you can control, and there's other things that you can't control. And so whatever you can control, and I'm telling you all this in your own lives, take control of that, right? If you can control what you do in your own communities, go do something about it. If you can't control what Donald Trump is going to say to Vladimir Putin, then don't worry about it, right? Just assess the outcome and pray, right? But if you can control what you do in your communities, what time you get up in the morning, what you do for your churches, etc., what you can control, take control of that. So thanks for asking that question. Okay. All right. Another question. That just says, that talks about things I want to say at the very end. All right. At David, 354. So I got a couple more minutes. At David, what do you think about the recent information revealed about Bill Barr? Well, I was very surprised, to be honest with you. And this is for those that don't know. There was information revealed about him that deal with Fannie, whatever her name is, Fannie down there in the district attorney for Atlanta, right? And I was shocked, really, about that Bill Barr had he's got a connection there, and it kind of sounds like maybe there was even some undermining of Trump. For those that paid really, really close attention, Bill Barr had a change of behavior, or certainly an emotional change happened in August of 2020. So August of 2020, there was a shift in Bill Barr. And if you go back and you really studied him, it's very clear. And as we go into the 2020 elections, we now know, with all of the egregious stuff that went on in the theft of our elections, Bill Barr had opportunities and didn't take them to investigate. So, let's push that to the side. It's important, but it's to the side. But Fannie and these people that Bill Barr is working with, so for those that don't know, I was subpoenaed to that. In that case, I tried to fight an extradition out of the state of Florida to Georgia. I lost that. They still made me go to Georgia. I had to go to Georgia, and I met Fannie, and I met remember her boyfriend. For those that remember her boyfriend, right? The guy that was in it. For 4.5 hours, I sat in front of her grand jury. He sat behind me. He refused to let me turn around and face him. These SOBs, that these people that just absolutely don't just hate Trump, they hate our country, right? So he sat there for 4.5 hours and grilled me, and I went through that whole process, him and Fannie, and then we learned what they were about, right? They were ripping each other off and whatever. But I was very surprised about Bill Barr, and I feel bad for him, because he's a guy with a long record of service to the country. And then what happened? But Bill Barr, you got to remember, he was not only the kind of the top lawyer for a big chunk of Hollywood, but he was also the top lawyer for the CIA. Bill Barr's got a long record in that world, and so I guess if you look at everything in total, it's not surprising, but it's too bad. Okay. One more question, maybe. At Corinne Daniel, what if Obama is found complicit in post-presidency criminal behavior? Well, if that happens, I'll let the constitutional experts, do what they need to do. Frankly, Donald Trump, and I'll say this before I do a big selfish promotion of my book here. President Trump, the only person in the country that takes the oath of office with the word preserve is the president of the United States. Not even the vice president of the United States takes the oath of office with the word preserve the Constitution, right? Preserve, protect, and defend. President does that. So the president has extraordinary powers to do things based on national security reasons. And he can wake up and say, because I said. Right now, everybody would go crazy, but he can do that. So what if Obama is found complicit in post-presidency criminal behavior? I would love him to go to jail for what he did while he was the president, never mind post. So that's where I stand on him, but we'll see what happens and what the people in the Department of Justice advise the president of the United States to do, President Trump. Okay. So I'm going to wrap it up here. We're at 3:58. I want to just, promote my new book, Pardon of Innocence. It's a great book. I really appreciate a lot of people who have already purchased it. It is a very telling book. If you really want to know how bad things are on one hand, and how the earlier question about what fight like a Flynn means, the book really does go into details about it. It's one of those books where it will make you laugh, it'll make you cry, it'll make you angry, but in the end, it will inspire you with a call to action for this country. And that's what that book is about. You know, faith and family are at the heart of it. That's very important parts of my life, and you know, that's, and such is life. So if you haven't had a chance, you can also get it on audio for those of you that, you know, like to go out and walk in the morning or something and you want to listen to a book. You can get it on audio. I did the audio myself, so it is me that did the audio, and the book itself is a good book. So you can buy it online, generalflynn.com, or you can buy it on Amazon. If you buy it at generalflynn.com, you know, you can buy it without a signature, or I'll sign it and we throw in, you know, one of my military coins, a copy of the movie itself. So it's pretty cool, a little gift to give to people. So anyway, I just want to say, I got 3:59. So we've been at almost an hour, been at this for almost an hour. Thank every single one of you for subscribing, for considering subscribing, for following me on all my social media platforms. I try to do this once a month, and I just want to say thanks to everybody. Don't give up. We're going to fight through this. Yeah, our country is worth it, right? I mean, God, I could walk you through history lessons on our country, and when we needed a sacrifice, we did. And because I know that you know, Chris Hager's still out there. I don't know if we have other Gold Star parents, but I just, you know, always pray for your son and what he gave. He gave his life for our country in Iraq, in his case. And so many have sacrificed for our country. We can't give up for them. That's what Fight Like a Flynn means. I mean, we're lucky to be here, right? We're all lucky to be able to have what we have. So anyway, all right, everybody, God bless, and out here, thank you.